Hi, my name is Adrian. I'm an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. The All African People's Revolutionary Party, or the AAPRP, is a revolutionary Pan-African socialist organization based on the African continent with chapters all over the world. The All African Women's Revolutionary Union is the women's wing of that organization. And I want to make a video to discuss the extremely pervasive belief that Africans on the continent hate Africans in the United States. And this is an idea that's like very, very common, and it's like the single greatest barrier that I encounter to folks being willing to listen or to accept Pan-Africanism or to hear about it. So yeah, there's like usually like three reasons I come across that people typically express for why they have this belief. The first one is that Africans on the continent look down on us, hate us, think that we are less than, and have internalized like straight up colonized ideas about who we are and what we believe. And the basis of that particular, of like the idea that they look down on us is interpersonal experiences with Africans from the continent. Like people have had negative experiences where like there was like elitist behavior or like classist behavior or like white supremacist behavior, and so people, yeah, it's based on like real things that have happened. Like in this video, by no means am I going to argue that people have not had these experiences, that have not experienced these things, or like they should feel differently about them or not be hurt. Like that is not the point of this video. Like it is completely reasonable to be hurt by that, particularly in like the specific situation that Africans in the United States find ourselves as descendants of slaves, as like second-class citizens, even on paper citizens who have none of the rights of citizenship, and so on. So to be rejected by what should be our homeland or folks from our homeland is like extremely hurtful. And so like, yeah, it's okay to be hurt by that, and it's like reasonable to be hurt by that. The issue though, is that like people will take those individual experiences or like multiple individual experiences and extrapolate them to the attitude or behavior of an entire continent. Like the best way I've ever heard it explain why that's a problem, I actually read on Facebook. Someone posted on Facebook after the movie Black Panther came out. Because the movie Black Panther, like the specific storyline with like Killmonger and T'Challa's father being a piece of trash and like leaving him to die or leaving him on his own after murdering his father, exactly, like it brought up a lot of discussion around that tension, around that belief that we are not wanted. Yeah, it just had like started a lot of conversations. It had like a lot of feelings out there. I think it was intentionally written to create that feeling, but that's like another video. But yeah, like that. So this person, in response to like seeing this discussion happening about us being rejected, was like rejected by Africans on the continent, was like, an entire continent doesn't hate you because a Nigerian was mean to you in the line at Family Dollar. And first of all, that's hilarious. And second of all, it's like a really simple, clear way of putting what the issue is with extrapolating individual experiences to an entire continent. Like you meet like one African person who was like elitist and shitty, or like five, or whatever. How many times it's happened to you? Like I believe it happened to you, but like using that experience to then say all of these people across all of these nations, across all of these cultural practices, across all of these contexts, also feel the exact same way on the basis of that handful of experiences, like that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then beyond that, like we also have to understand that it's like really actually pretty fucking difficult to get into the United States, and you have to have like a certain level of class status, you have to have like a certain level of education, you have to have like only certain people make it through, and so the sample size you're meeting is like selected for that. So you have to also keep that in mind. So yeah, like I think that the issue is not like no one is erasing the fact that like Africans in the United States have had negative experiences with Africans on the continent. Like I believe it, I've seen it, but we can't extrapolate those experiences to an entire continent. We can't. It's particularly one that we are very, very intentionally kept in the dark about. Like what we hear about Africa is that it's poor, is that it's like full of disease, is that it needs us to send our petties a day or whatever. And that's like what we hear, like in terms of like African history, like real African history, like revolutionary African history, radical African history, history of African struggle. We don't hear shit. We don't hear about like what language they speak, or how they live, or how they dress. So like we don't know. We know very little about them, and so we don't have a basis to be drawing like these broad ass conclusions about what those folks think about us. Like we just don't know. So yeah, I just think it's problematic. While those things definitely happen, it is problematic to extrapolate them to an entire, it's like millions of people, like hundreds of millions of people. So yeah, the next reason that I hear a lot is that Africans on the continent like left us behind, basically. That they never tried to stop Europeans when they came to the continent and kidnapped us, kidnapped our ancestors, that they never came back for us, but they basically let like the worst happen to us and just like chilled while we were enslaved. And that is, I understand, like I also, again, like all of these like rationalizations for the belief that Africans and continents hate us are like understandable based on our context, based on our experience. But I think that when we look at them a little bit deeper, you begin to see like, first of all, like some questionable origins, and second of all, like that some of these, like we have to look past like the trauma at what's actually happening. So yeah, like the idea that they never tried to save us on the continent is like just flat out not true. Queen Nzinga of Angola is like a really good example of a monarch in Africa who like who leveraged like all her power of the diplomacy, of politics, but also of warfare to fight the Portuguese and stop them from stealing her subjects, just from stealing Africans from modern day Angola. So yeah, like that's one example. There's also Abdur Kader Kane. There's also like countless stories. Who was in Senegal, I believe, and who was like a Muslim African person who basically like wrote a letter to Europeans and I was like, "We're going to come and find you and kill you if you don't bring our people back. Like, stop taking them. There will be repercussions." And it was a very strongly worded missive to a European imperialist power, basically making it very clear that the penalty for kidnapping Africans from this nation was death. So these are two examples of people who, far from just being like, yeah, just take them, were like, the fuck you will, and put all of their resources, like decades and a lot of money and time into making sure that Europeans would not take us. So that's already out the window. Like the idea that no one was trying for us is bullshit. And then beyond that, like it's not just monarchs, because we had all kinds of different societal structures throughout Africa. We had communal structures, we had feudal structures. So like in some like villages near the coast where like Europeans were making these raids and kidnapping us, like they set up in extremely advanced defense mechanisms like moats and like and houses on stilts and like moving entire communities into hard to reach territories that they could defend, like rerouting entire rivers in like a couple of cases, like to change the stream so the Europeans could not sail upstream. Like all of these like extremely brilliant, extremely strategic ways of making sure that their people wouldn't be captured, of like making sure that they tried to save us is the thing. Like the idea that people, like even if you don't know anything about this history, even if like it's just like a black hole of knowledge to you, like just think about the idea of living with someone like your whole life, living in a community with like with a person and seeing someone come and take them. Like would you do nothing? Like do you think people would see like their like cousins and aunties and like grandmas and like little sisters and brothers like being taken away in chains and just would be like, that's cool, we hate them in here? Like you think that that's really what happened? Like we didn't fight back? Like it doesn't make any sense. On its face, it doesn't make any sense. Like of course, Africans on the continent fought back. Of course they did. Of course they tried to stop them from taking us. Of course they did. Did it happen everywhere? Of course not. Did some of them sell us because of like old ass like intertribal warfare or whatever? Like of course, like that happened too. But we also have to acknowledge that some of them did try to stop it. That some of them did try to save us. And then as far as the idea like of like so once we were brought over here and enslaved, they didn't come for us. Like they had shit to do. Like the Europeans were not just like taking us and then letting them be. The Europeans, like throughout this entire period, throughout the 1700s and 1800s and the 1900s, were fighting for territory and resources in Africa. We're colonizing Africa. We're putting Africans into concentration camps and committing acts of genocide and stealing their land. And like the impact of losing millions of its most able-bodied, most capable, most useful segments of the population to the slave trade, like. They lost like a third of Africa's population. You think that had no impact? As they were having to defend themselves from European imperialism and colonialism, like, you think that they had time? You think that they could breathe? You think that they were just like thriving while we were over here in chains? No. They have been defending themselves for as long as we had. They had shit to do. If they had the capacity and ability to fight back against European imperialism, to fight back against genocide and the theft of their land, and build ships capable of sailing across the sea, and raise armies capable of taking on the settler state in the United States, you think that they fucking would have. But they didn't have time to do that shit. They were occupied defending themselves from colonialism. So, like, the idea that, like, they just were, like, chilling resting on their laurels because they were just like, fuck them. It's stupid to me. I'm sorry, I got like really agitated. I just got really worked out with that section because like when people say that, I'm like, people, yeah. I'm just like, what do you think was happening in Africa while we were over here? Like, the Europeans didn't just leave them alone. That continent has been intentionally underdeveloped for centuries. Like, they were fighting for their existence just like we were. If we had had the capacity to help each other at that time, we would have. But we didn't. And to hold that against them is incorrect. Yeah. And the last thing, the last reason that I hear about why they hate us, why Africans hate Africans in the United States, Africans in the continent hate Africans in the United States, is that they never cared about our struggles. They never like tried to help us. They never like, yeah. There's just no solidarity. They don't give a fuck about us. You can look back at a year and see that's not true. Like, see solidarity statements coming from the Fees Must Fall movement in South Africa. See solidarity statements coming. It's like a Black Lives Matter chapter in Ghana, like the National Network. Like, that's like, you can look in the very recent past and see that's not true. But even before that, like, we have like Black Panthers who were persecuted by this settler state, who were framed for crimes they did not commit, who were tortured and imprisoned, who fled this country to find a new homeland on the continent and were welcomed with open arms. Like, we have the O'Neills in Tanzania. We have many, many Black Panthers that went to Algeria after that country had its revolution and found like safety there. We have Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, who went to Ghana and was like in that state, in that nation's government. Like, we have many, many, many examples of Africans from the diaspora, and specifically Africans in the United States, who found refuge on the continent with radical and revolutionary leaders, who found solidarity, who found like a basis of unity. And even before that, many, many African, like the most decorated African revolutionaries, the people who we consider our ideologues, like Kwame Nkrumah, have gone, and Thomas Sankara, have gone to like Harlem, have lived in like the United States, have gone to school in the United States, have observed the conditions of African United States, who have communicated that they clearly could see that our struggles are connected, that we're facing similar conditions. So like, when people say like there's never shown solidarity, they never care about us, like, that's a very clear indication that this person does not have a solid understanding of like the history of the African liberation struggle, both the United States and in the continent. Because like throughout that history, like especially beginning in the 20th century, there has been a ton of collaboration and travel back and forth and communication back and forth. And like an intentional moving intentionally to connect the struggles in the continent to the struggles in the diaspora. Like, that's been happening for like 100 years. So yeah, it's just an argument that has no basis in reality. And when people make it, like the first two are understandable to me. Like, they look down on us because like an African, sometimes they're fucking snobby. And then they never went back to save us. Like, that's just like pure trauma because we are very, very intentionally and systematically disconnected from those roots in our homeland, and we are very intentionally taught to believe that that we are not wanted anywhere on earth. And so, like, yeah, the idea that like we would be the discarded portion of the population that people just didn't care to save is like an attitude or a feeling that like makes sense in the context of what we've been taught about ourselves. But like the idea that they never cared about our struggles, like, I don't know. It's difficult for me to like accept that when people say that, because I'm like, if you knew if you studied like a little, if you like Googled like one time, you would know. Well, that's not true. So yeah, those are like the three main things I often hear when people are like, they hate us. And I just wanted to like kind of break down why they irritate me so. And I hope that this was like a helpful explanation or a helpful refutation of those reasons. And if it wasn't, I welcome your comments and drags and private messages. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this like long ass video. Have a good day. Forward ever.